was looking at a construction photograph from 1909. Not the Great Wall itself, but a small section of railroad embankment being built outside Tianjin by a crew of 40 men using wheelbarrows and wicker baskets. The photograph is sharp enough that you can count the workers. In the margins of the engineering report, someone had penciled in the daily progress. 11 meters of packed earth and stone per day, working sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. 11 meters, 40 men, modern tools for the period, including steel rails to move the dirt. I sat with that number for a long time because if 40 men with industrial-era tools could move 11 meters of embankment per day, then I needed to go back and recalculate what it would have taken to build something 13,000 miles long. We are told that the Great Wall of China was constructed primarily during the Ming Dynasty, between 1368 and 1644. That gives us 276 years. The official account states that the wall as we see it today, the brick and stone structure that winds across mountains and deserts, was built by millions of conscripted laborers using hand tools, bamboo scaffolding, and human muscle. The narrative is that this was a monumental but achievable feat of organized labor spread across multiple generations. The bricks were fired in kilns, the stone was quarried from nearby mountains, the mortar was mixed from rice flour and lime. Workers carried materials up mountain slopes on their backs. Watchtowers were positioned every few hundred meters. The whole system was a fortification against northern invaders, specifically the Mongols, and it represents the largest construction project in human history. That is what we are told. I want to be careful here, because the numbers I am about to present are not speculative. They are based on the wall's documented dimensions, the material properties of Ming-era brick and stone construction, and the labor productivity rates that we have records for from the same period and region. The Great Wall, in its current brick and stone form, runs approximately 13,000 miles. Not all of that is intact, but the segments that remain allow us to calculate the average dimensions. The wall averages 25 feet in height and 20 feet in width at the base. The watchtowers add additional mass. Conservative estimates put the total volume of material at over 100 million cubic meters of brick, stone, and rammed earth. Each cubic meter of finished wall requires not just the primary material, but also the mortar, the fill, the foundation work, and the transport of everything to the construction site, much of which is at elevation on mountain ridges. Let's start with the bricks. A single brick in the sections of the wall that still stand weighs approximately 15 kilograms. The wall contains an estimated 3 billion bricks. I'm going to assume that half of those were used in the primary construction, and half in repairs over the centuries, which is generous to the official timeline. That still leaves 1.5 billion bricks that had to be manufactured, transported, and laid during the Ming Dynasty. To fire a brick, you need a kiln. A traditional Chinese kiln of the period could fire approximately 10,000 bricks per cycle. Each cycle took 1 week, so a single kiln, running continuously, could produce 520,000 bricks per year. To produce 1.5 billion bricks in 276 years, you would need 110 kilns running at full capacity without interruption for the entire duration of the dynasty. But kilns break. Fuel runs out, workers get sick, winters halt production. If we assume a more realistic 60% operational capacity, you now need 183 kilns, and that is just for the bricks. That does not include the stone, which makes up an equal volume of the wall in many sections. Now transport. The wall runs through some of the most remote and mountainous terrain in China. The bricks had to be moved from the kilns to the construction site. A worker carrying 2 bricks can move roughly 30 kilograms. If the average distance from kiln to wall is 10 kilometers, which is conservative given the remoteness of many sections, then each worker makes 1 round trip per day. That is 2 bricks per worker per day. To move 1.5 billion bricks over 276 years at 2 bricks per worker per day, you need 14,876 workers doing nothing but carrying bricks every single day for 276 years. And those workers also need food, water, shelter, and replacement when they die. The logistical support for 14,000 workers in remote mountains is itself a construction project. We have no records of supply chains on that scale, no documents describing the management of that labor force, no evidence of the kilns themselves and the quantities required. Then there is the question of the stone. The wall's foundation and much of its core is stone, not brick. Quarrying stone with hand tools is slow. A skilled stoneworker in the Ming period could cut and dress roughly 1 cubic meter of stone per week. The wall contains tens of millions of cubic meters of cut stone. If we assume 10 million cubic meters of dressed stone, which is conservative and each worker produces 1 cubic meter per week, then you need 46,000 workers quarrying and dressing stone full-time for 276 years just to supply the stone. Those workers also need to be fed, housed, and replaced. Add the 14,000 brick carriers, add the kiln workers, add the masons actually laying the brick and stone, add the workers mixing mortar, add the workers building scaffolding, add the workers constructing the watchtowers. You are now well over 100,000 workers in continuous operation for the entire Ming Dynasty just to meet the material requirements of the official timeline. And yet, the Ming Dynasty was not at peace for 276 years. It fought wars, it had famines, it had plagues. The idea that it maintained an uninterrupted construction workforce of that scale for nearly 3 centuries strains against every historical record we have of the period. I remain skeptical of easy answers, but I keep coming back to one thing. In the sections of the wall that have been excavated and studied, the quality of construction is extraordinary. The bricks are uniform, the mortar joints are tight. The stone is fitted with precision that makes modern reconstruction efforts look crude by comparison. And this quality is consistent across thousands of miles. If the wall were built piecemeal over centuries by different crews under different administrations with different resource availability, you would expect to see variation in quality, in materials, in construction techniques. You would expect to see sections that are clearly later additions or repairs, different from the original work. And yet the wall, in its brick and stone form, reads as a single coherent project. The acoustic properties are consistent. The sight lines between watchtowers are mathematically optimized. The gradient management on steep slopes shows an understanding of hydrology and erosion that suggests a centralized engineering authority, not a multi-generational patchwork. There is something else. The wall follows the ridgelines with a precision that suggests it was surveyed from above. The placement of watchtowers corresponds to natural choke points and sight lines in ways that would require an aerial view to optimize. We are told this was done by scouts, on foot, marking positions and relaying them back to engineers. But the margin for error in that method is high, and the wall shows almost no errors. The towers are placed where they need to be, not where they would be if someone were guessing from the ground. I am not going to make a definitive claim about how that was achieved, but I'm going to note that the precision suggests a level of surveying capability that does not fit with the tools we are told were available. What the evidence appears to suggest is that the wall, as a brick and stone structure, may not have been built by the Ming Dynasty at all. The Ming may have repaired it, they may have maintained it, they may have garrisoned it. But the idea that they constructed 13,000 miles of engineered fortification from scratch using hand tools and human labor does not survive contact with the arithmetic. The labor requirements alone exceed the population mobility of the period. The material production requirements exceed the industrial capacity. The timeline does not allow for the interruptions that we know occurred, and the quality of the work exceeds what incremental multi-generational construction would produce. If the wall was not built by the Ming, then it was inherited. And if it was inherited, the question becomes, from whom? The official history provides no answer to this. There is no reference to a pre-Ming structure of comparable scale. There are older walls, certainly. Qin Dynasty walls, Han Dynasty walls. But those are rammed earth, and they do not align with the brick and stone wall we see today. The wall that exists is not an accumulation of earlier efforts. It is a single system, a design system, a completed system. And it is treated by the historical record as if it simply appeared during the Ming period, fully formed. I keep thinking about those watchtowers. There are thousands of them spaced with geometric consistency. Each one had to be provisioned. Each one had to have a garrison. Each one had to have a line of sight to the next tower so that signals could be relayed. The official story is that this was a military communication network. Fire signals by night, smoke signals by day. But if the wall was a border, why does it cut through the middle of what is now China? Why does it not run along the current northern border? Why does it divide regions that were, by the Ming period, already under Chinese control? The answer given is that the borders were different then, that the Mongols controlled the north. But the wall runs through areas that were not contested during the majority of the Ming period. It divides farmland from farmland. It crosses rivers that were not natural borders. It does not behave like a fortification built in response to an immediate threat. It behaves like a marker, a boundary, a line drawn by someone who was dividing the world into zones. There is a pattern here, and it repeats. Massive stone and brick structures that require industrial capacity to build, attributed to pre-industrial societies. Precision that requires advanced surveying. Attribute to tools that do not allow for that precision. Construction timelines that do not allow for the labor, the materials, or the logistics required. And in every case, the institutional response is the same. Maintain the timeline. Attribute the work to the accepted civilization. Do not investigate the discrepancies. The wall is Chinese, built by Chinese laborers. During the Chinese dynasties we have records for. Any suggestion otherwise is fringe, is nationalist mythology, is misunderstanding the capacity of human labor when properly organized. But the numbers do not support the narrative. They never have. I cannot tell you who built the wall. I cannot tell you when the brick and stone version was actually constructed. But I can tell you that the official story requires a sustained industrial effort that the Ming Dynasty did not have the capacity to execute. And I can tell you that the wall itself, in its design and execution, reads as a finished project, not a multi-century accumulation. What that implies about the civilization that preceded the one we have records for, I leave to you, but the wall is still there. You can walk on it, you can measure it, you can calculate what it would take to build. There's one more thing I have not been able to reconcile: the mortar. Traditional Ming-era mortar was made from lime and rice flour, sometimes mixed with clay. The recipe is documented. The compressive strength of that mortar, when properly mixed and cured, reaches approximately 3 megapascals. The mortar in the wall, in the oldest sections that have been tested, exceeds 8 megapascals in some locations. That is not a small discrepancy. That is a fundamental difference in material composition. Modern researchers have struggled to replicate it. The official explanation is that the recipe varied by region, that some crews discovered superior mixtures through trial and error. But if that were true, you would expect those superior mixtures to be documented, to be shared, to become the standard. Instead, we have isolated sections of the wall with mortar that exceeds the documented capabilities of the period, surrounded by sections using the standard mixture. The pattern suggests not experimentation, but inheritance. Sections of older, superior construction preserved and extended using the materials available at the time.